This is question 16 of civil engineering paper of K2011. For a given discharge, the critical flow depth in an open channel depends on. So in this question, it is given that for a given discharge, the critical flow depth in an open channel depends on. So there are various parameters given. We need to select the correct parameter on which the critical flow depth depends. So for a study about critical flow depth and other related topic in detail, you may watch lecture 30, Introduction to Open Channel Flow and Uniform Flow, Hydraulic Engineering by Professor Mohammad Saud Afzal, IIT Kharagpur. So we know if we write the energy equation, so E equal to Y plus V square by 2G. So we can also write this V as Q by Y, where Q is discharge per unit width of the channel and Y is the depth of channel. So if we rewrite this equation, this is Y equal to Y plus Q square by 2G Y square. So from this equation, we can say for a given E and Q, this is a cubic equation in terms of Y. So this equation yields three value of Y: Y subcritical, Y supercritical and Y negative. So since negative value of depth has no significance, so this Y negative can be disregarded since the depth cannot be in negative value, so this value can be disregarded. Now and this in this graph, this x axis is showing energy E and y axis is showing depth Y. So from this graph it can be seen that for one value of energy, it is giving two value of depth. One depth is called Y subcritical depth and another value of depth is called supercritical depth. But at one point, this graph is giving the minimum energy value, and corresponding to this E minimum, the depth is called critical depth. YC is called critical depth, critical depth or critical flow depth. For minimum energy, the depth is considered as critical depth. So for finding E minimum, for E minimum, this dE by dy equal to 0, dE by dy equal to 0, and when we solve this equation, we will get YC equal to Q square by G to the power 1 by 3, and this is YC. So this YC is called what? Critical depth, and this critical depth is corresponding to minimum energy. So if we see this equation for for critical flow depth, we can see this YC is depends on Q, a small q, where a small q is nothing but the discharge per unit width. So in this question it is given for a given discharge. So since capital Q is constant, that is for given discharge, this Q depends only upon B, that is width of the channel. So we can say that YC, that is critical flow depth, depends on flow width. Or if we see these options, so in option A, channel geometry only, yes. Why? Because YC equal to, just now we saw YC equal to Q square by G to the power 1 by 3, where this Q depends on width of the channel. So we may say that critical flow depth in an open channel depends on channel geometry only. But if we see further options, so the options B is channel geometry and bed slope. So in this equation there is no terminology for bed slope, so this is option, this is wrong. Again in option C, channel geometry, bed slope and roughness, again this is wrong. Option D, channel geometry, bed slope, roughness and Reynolds number, no. There is no terminology like this Reynolds number and roughness or bed slope in this equation. So we may say The critical flow depth in an open channel depends on channel geometry only, which is given in option A. So option A is the correct answer for this question. Thank you.